Guys, I'm excited today. We've got a guest. It's a very dear friend, a guy that I love a whole lot, that's joining us today. And known Trey for a few years, several years, and have walked through some stuff with him. And boy, I'm excited because one thing about my brother is Trey. There's nobody that works harder in advancing the kingdom of God in the hearts of men. And so today, we're just going to kind of have Trey, even like we do at our men's coaching weekends, Deer Camp, tell us your story. So Trey's going to share parts of his story with us. And today, he's going to kind of get current with his story. Probably many of you listening to this podcast may be familiar with Trey and the story from up to several years ago. Then he just kind of disappeared. But he had not disappeared. Trey has been doing his work. And we've had podcast episodes about that. And so today we're going to kind of catch up with Trey and get current and talk about what's happening today in his life and where he's at. And so, man, Trey, dude, I'm so glad you're here. Love you. And I've been excited about this episode for quite some time. So, man,
well,
let's just jump in.
Well, thank you. I'm doing very well, actually. It's been a minute since I've done anything like this. And so, I appreciate that introduction and certainly excited. That's, I think, the pervasive feeling as I do a feelings check, excited about sharing and really you having played such a role in the story that we're about to share as well, Ron, and certainly love you, brother. Appreciate you, your ministry, what you and Eva are doing, and Ben, I guess since all this is blown up, I've gotten to know you as well. And so just appreciate y'all's hearts for men and providing a platform like this. And I coach and had a ministry that was somewhat public. That's all, I guess, relative, but some listening may have seen the movie The Heart of Man, that incredible depiction of the gospel. Amazing filmmakers and what they did with kind of bringing current the
let me just, by the way, if any of our listeners, if you haven't watched or seen The Heart of Man movie, documentary, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but boy, you need to go watch that. It is excellent. Not just because Trey's in it, that makes it better, but it is a powerful story and picture of our journeys.
Yeah, Heart of Man is such a beautiful story, and it's almost, it's painful because we're the only couple that's featured, and now we're not a couple anymore. And so I almost now wish that we weren't in the film, just so that there's not that tension, I guess, if you will. But just was blindsided. Roan, appreciate, obviously the role that you played in all of this, and certainly had a front row seat, as did Ro, your son. Actually, Ro and one of our other mutual friends were actually working as therapists at the intensive, just a week and a half after everything had blown up in that April time frame. And so we're ministering to these men that have come from all over for this 4-day intensive and helping them with their shame and all that. And then afterwards, they're pouring into me, ministering to me, helping me understand kind of what's happening, right? And so just to kind of, I guess, go into what happened. And that whole put on your own mask first. And it's funny to even say it that way because I spent years removing a mask, right? And now a healing mask, right? But, was partly, when we got remarried because of my sexual brokenness that led to the first divorce, when we did come back together, one of the lies that my ex had to fight was he just wanted to reconcile so that he could pick up with his ministry mistress and then move on, right? That was a big lie. And I consciously, subconsciously tried to help fight that lie by at times putting aside some of the things that I really felt called to do with men in support of her, so that it wouldn't feed this lie that, see, now we're back together and he's spending all of his time doing this men's work. And so I was accused a lot of, ministry being the mistress, even toward the end. Some of the things now looking back with hindsight, I can see, some of the things that she was saying, but what I wish that I had done a better job, and I'll start with this, that when some of these things were coming, instead of getting defensive and hurt and, just, wondering what was going on, I wish that I'd done a better job of just holding on to myself, who I was in my true identity, and then getting curious about that, because I knew what she was saying was not true, but it was hurtful. And I think in our situation, because we had a ministry that were helping others, I was operating as if we're on the same page here. I mean, the tagline for anybody who heard our podcast was "Life is messy, bring your boots," right? I mean, we're talking about the messiness of life. And, we would talk about marriages. We would speak. And one of the main things that we would teach on was marriage is difficult, and it's difficult by design. And one of the questions I never got asked when all this happened is, what is so difficult about what is currently, going on, what we're going through, that is outside of God's design, that no longer fits that criteria, right? And never got an answer to that. And so, here, overhearing maybe a coaching session where she was talking to a woman, or being in a couple situation where we're ministering together with a couple, and hearing her speak truth to a woman, exactly what she should say. But then time after time after time, when it was just the two of us behind closed doors, almost an exact depiction of what maybe had just happened that afternoon. And it's almost just the opposite of what I'm experiencing. And it was so confusing and hurtful, because in my mind, I was like, I know this stuff. I know how to own emotions and share, that feelings are real but not necessarily true, and all the things that we talked. But I was constantly kind of getting blindsided. And by the time that something was brought to me, she had already made up her mind about something, and things like, you need to be going to a recovery group that's outside of our ministry. And certainly I was open to doing that, but at the same time, I wasn't just going to jump through every hoop that she put out there either, right? That's what I'm coaching men. You can't come back into a reconciliation and be in a parent-child dynamic. It could quickly become a parent-child where, okay, we're reconciled, but basically she's the parent and he's the child. And it's kind of this whole idea that he's just lucky to be here and he better not step out of bounds, or she's going to, whap him with a billy club. So we were, I was operating, because when we first got remarried, and this was the shift that I missed. And I was just saying, what I wish I'd done a better job of just being more curious, because when we first reconciled, to my ex's credit, she coming from that elder brother sin, right? And that's what Heart of Man talks about, the prodigal and the elder brother. And I love what Tim Keller says in Prodigal God, that we can rebel by being very good, and we can rebel by being very bad. And really, in our reconciliation story, when we would share, both the elder brothers and the prodigals were impacted, because nobody, because I can talk about grace with my story and my past, and the elder brothers in the room are saying, well, isn't that great that you're a grace junkie? How convenient. Look at what you've done, right? How convenient just to cover over all of that. But when my ex would say some of the same things from that elder brother standpoint, it was like, wait a minute, because those sins of self-righteousness, and to her credit, when we came back together in 2008, we were operating from, we're all addicts, we're, the foot, ground is leveled at the foot of the cross. It's like there's, just helping even women owning this elder brother sin, because even though the consequences of sin certainly are different, that God sees sin in the same way. But what I missed is a shift along the way. And Ron, you helped me see some of this. Rose certainly did, even in that first event, was, I remember Rose, even there at that event, he said, as a therapist, we are trained in our clinical training with something that's called transference, and how to recognize when transference is happening, right? When something is happening in your office and maybe something then at home later that afternoon is very similar. They're saying your spouse or kids or somebody saying something very similar, to making sure that transference is not happening. And Ron, you can speak more to that, but here my ex every day for, at that point, probably been 4 or 5 years, was wading into the very hard, very painful, very messy place of betrayal trauma, helping women. And she did a great job with a lot of that, but yet she wasn't a therapist. So I think what began to happen, I'll never know for sure, but that transference began to happen. She began to hear all these stories, and there was triggering happening. And I missed that. I was still operating as if we're good. We're still operating from this, we're all addicts. And there was that subtle shift that began to happen. And so it was very hurtful, because again, I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. This stuff, but why are you not connecting the dots of how this situation that we're going through is the same as that you were coaching this woman through this afternoon, or what you were encouraging her in front of her husband to handle that differently. And so because I was giving her the benefit of the doubt that she knew this stuff, it felt like an on purpose hurting of me. It's almost like the rules didn't apply, and it was just really confusing. And now, obviously, in hindsight, I've had a lot more time to kind of think through that. But in the moment, I'm just like, wow, what is this? But hey, we're reconciled, we're married, we're helping others. And so just to kind of bring it out of the vague, okay, listeners say, okay, well, what happened? Well, at deer camp, you've been telling me about deer camp for years. I go to deer camp. I forget what year that was. And I meet Brandon and Bill. And they're talking about all these incredible things they do out in Colorado. And I'm talking to them about True Blue Tribe, this thing that I've had on the back burner since 2012, what I want to do for men, and helping them pursue the bigger, better story. And so they told me about this Colorado thing. And then later we were in the food line, and I forget if it was Bill or Brandon, but they said, if you like that kind of stuff, because at the time I was living in Birmingham, just north of you in Birmingham, some of the best climbing, in the Southeast is right there in Sand Rock, Alabama. You ought to go on one of our climbing weekends, yeah, you can go with us to Colorado, but, and so I signed up. So that April I signed up. One of my buddies, Travis, who at the time was with the Air Force, he just retired, but he was going to go with me, but he got called up about a week and a half before with the Air Force. And I knew this was it was a climbing event, but it was also a recovery. So this particular weekend was for other helpers. I'm not a therapist, but definitely helping with others with our ministry. A lot of other therapists were there. So when Travis had to back out, I thought, well, maybe my boys would like to go, because they certainly would like to climb. But then I don't know, it might be a little weird, my son's, on the recovery side and being with other therapists. So anyway, I wound up going by myself. That was April the 9th. That was a Friday, April 9th, 2021. Well, backing up on April 7th. So my ex-wife's birthday was on the 8th. On that 7th, that Wednesday night, we were about to go to bed, getting ready for bed, and this is what she said to me. This is what Blindsided kind of started the whole deal. And we never really had a real conversation after this Wednesday night when this statement was made. She said, Trey, you have no friends, and you quit growing in 2008. And guys, it felt like a 2x4 to the gut, because what I heard in that, because I am a helper. I am open with my story. We talked about the heart of man. My worst season of my life is now very, very public, right? And I'm putting it out there, being open, honest, transparent, in order to offer hope, right? To be transparent, to lead with a limp, all the things that we teach and talk about. And so here she's saying, you have no friends, and you quit growing in 2008. So what she's saying is, you're a fraud, right? You quit growing in 2008, so you have nothing really to offer these other men. And this is now not only my wife, but also my business partner, right? This is our livelihood. And this is her, not just, hey, this is how I feel. These are matter-of-fact statements. And so was very hurt, angry, didn't really know how to process that. And so the next day was her birthday. We went out to eat with a friend of hers and got husband, and I'm kind of removed. I'm not engaged because I'm still reeling here. I'm hurting.
Sure.
And so as it turns out, I had this climbing weekend already on the calendar, the 9th, 10th, 11th, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right, with Brandon and Bill. And again, had nothing to do with our ministry. Here's a growth weekend that I'd already signed up for, but yet, according to her, I quit growing in 2000. And here's the thing. I love doing my work. I mean, I took advantage of what the board allowed me to do when all this blew up with your buddy Jim. And so on the way driving up on Friday, I've got two good guys. Barry, who was one of the other therapists with Roe that weekend, he had already kind of been brought into what was going on. So half the trip, I'm talking to Barry, processing. And then my good friend Michael, who's a life coach and author, Michael Warden, he was the other half of that trip. So basically just the whole trip, I'm on the phone processing with these two men. And so again, doing what I know to do. I'm leaning toward community. I'm not isolating, right? I'm going to my guys who know me and, can give perspective. And so I remember as I'm pulling on the campus there where the climbing weekend takes place, and I'm talking to Michael, getting off the phone, and he said, hey, you get out of this weekend what you need to get, and then deal with what you need to deal with Melody when you get back on Sunday. And so that's what I did. I showed up. So it wound up raining that Friday night. So now, first of all, because it was a men's weekend where I thought, because I met them at deer camp, and so all the images on the website was men. So I'm just assuming this is a men's thing. So I'm putting up my Hennessy hammock right in the pine trees there on this.
Come
place.
on.
And I overhear one of the guys saying, "These are the tents for the ladies." And really, I was like, "Oh crap! There's women here." And so here now, Melody and I are disconnected, right? I'm hurting for what happened, what she said that Wednesday. But and also this Friday, this is the day she wanted to put our house on the market. I wasn't really for that, but she put our house on the market. So I texted her and I said, hey, just letting you know, I didn't realize this, but there are women here on this trip. And she just simply said, thanks for letting me know. And then after that, our texting was she's sending me offers as they're coming in on the house, right? She's in touch with the real estate agent. And so she's texting me those things. So it came a thunderstorm that night. I mean, it's nothing like being among trees with a lightning and thunderstorm. It was amazing. Stayed bone dry. Shout out to Hennessy hammocks. They're great.
Yeah.
But because of that storm, though, and the fog that rolled in, we weren't able to climb until really the afternoon of that Saturday, right? And so this is what's happening now subconsciously. We had at the time a group text. My mom, my 4 children, and my ex were a part of this group text. And I'm sending pictures of the hammock. I'm telling, in the text, I'm telling them about the storm the night before. And and also now in retrospect, what I'm also, because I'm hurting again with my stuff, if I'm wanting to go off the reservation and act out, that was a perfect situation, right? I mean, I could have easily said, sorry, no cell phone coverage. And I could have gone to Atlanta. I could have gone to Chattanooga. I could have disappeared. And I had a weekend of cover, right, to go and do whatever if I wanted to medicate in the old ways that I was medicating. And so here I was hurting, but also I now look back at those texts, and what I was really saying is, hey, I am where I'm supposed to be, right? I'm giving evidence. And I don't think I was fully in touch with that at the time. But one of the younger females who was there, she did remind me of my older daughter. And I said in the text, Ryland, my oldest, I think I've met your twin. She was outdoorsy and she was very creative and loved hiking and all that kind of stuff. And Ryland said, send me a photo. And so I took a photo and I told the girl what I was doing. And she reminded me of older daughter and all this. Well, later I was accused and how perverted that I was kind of hitting on a girl that was my daughter's age, right? I mean, that was kind of part of what was in the, as all the stuff thrown on the wall that was trying to find something to stick. And so anyway, we finally get to climb, and it was an incredible weekend, right? Just fast forwarding, just camping, really got back in touch with that. We had a great event on that Sunday morning by the river, a journaling event, and I was just weeping and so excited on the way home, because what I got in touch with that Sunday is, wow, why have I not camped more? I want to bring so I was going to bring the family to do this. I wanted to get a climbing guide and just let them experience not only the climbing, but all the different things that Bill and Brandon were bringing out, and the parallels with the work that we do, knowing ourselves internally and all that. So, but it hit me that Sunday morning that when everything came out in my story way back before, we had finished a camping trip, a long weekend. It was a Monday, a holiday kind of long weekend deal, and everything came out. So we'd camped that weekend before, and everything came out like that Thursday. And so what I realized there that Sunday morning is, I realize why I haven't taken the family camping, because there's a lot of negative connotations with camping, right? And so what I did is I said, I'm going to redeem this. And so I'm excited. I'm on the way home. And the first thing is that the kids, my daughter who lives in Colorado, and she's a wedding photographer. So I knew her weekends were already booking up. So sometime in the fall, again, this was April, I was looking at hopefully October, November. And I'd already talked to Bill. It's like, okay, if we do this, I know I'm going to have a guide. And he tells me that a guy that I already knew in Birmingham is already on his insurance, would probably be my guide. And if he can't do it, his daughter would do it. And then I put together that his daughter is one of my daughter's good friends. And so all this stuff has kind of fallen in place, and I'm excited. So I FaceTime my daughter, and this excitement's coming out with my daughter. And, guess who might be our guide? Honey might be, our guide when we do this. And so what I didn't know is what was going on with my ex back home. Right. And so basically get home, and my son, my youngest son and I, we had restored a Land Cruiser, an FJ40 Land Cruiser. So my ex is at the office, so I go by the office. He comes pulling up in the Land Cruiser at the office, and we all go out to eat. And it winds up just being my son and I talking, because it's icy with my ex because of, again, what had happened that Wednesday. And again, what I did not know at the time, it was the next day before I really knew this, where we had a standing Monday meeting where we talked ministry stuff, finances, both personal and whatever. So I'd worked that Monday at home. And I called her and I said, hey, instead of us doing our 2:00 meeting, why don't you come home and let's try to get back on the same page? And so that was April the 12th. And in that meeting, very early on, she said, Trey, I know you acted out this weekend. You need to tell the children what you've done, and you need to move out. And guys, talking about being absolutely blindsided. Again, it wasn't a question. It wasn't a, here's what I'm feeling. Hey, I'm really worried because there were women there. It was a matter of fact. I know you've acted out. And honestly, guys, from that statement and the way that meeting went, we never had another honest conversation from that point till this day today, almost 4 years later.
Damn.
It was a case building. It was, it was just, okay, that's not sticking. Because here's the thing now. So because of my story, Roan, you and I talked a lot about it. I don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? And this was right in the middle of the Me Too movement, where a woman says it, you're just supposed to believe it. And so soon after this, just kind of fill in some quick gaps, she went to the board, and I really feel like she felt that I'm going to go to the board. She had been on my iPad and had said that I'd been acting out on Instagram. The very next day, with the Explore page and whatever was coming up, the next day, 2 of my male board members were in the office, and we were pulling up my Explore page, and we're looking, and I think we found 2 females in a photo, scrolling. So certainly nothing inappropriate there, but that was part of the accusation. And it just became this ongoing accusations that basically I was back in my addiction. Anything that I objected, it was like, that's what addicts do. They gaslight, and all the language and the lingo, is now used against me. And so I realized I need to do a polygraph. And I had members of the board saying, don't do it, because if this goes to divorce, I was like, I know I'm going to pass it because it's not true. But what I also wanted to have a factual document that took it out of the realm of he said, she said, right? And so at this time, so Roan, you and Eva graciously, you guys are probably now booked out. Well, we're recording this almost Thanksgiving, November. Y'all probably booked out through March, as any good counselor is. If you're a good counselor, you're booked out, 4, 6, 8 months out. Well, we knew you guys, y'all graciously, I don't know what kind of work it. I can only imagine the kind of work to clear your calendar for a 4-day intensive the following week with less than a week's notice. And y'all did that, and I wonder what would have happened had we made it to Jackson, right? Because, again, all your listeners know your story. I mean, y'all are married, divorced, remarried, and now running a practice together. And I really think looking back,
sounds familiar. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a big piece of it. It was this working together. This, again, I will never fully understand what she was and maybe is dealing with, but I do know that there's this feminist message coming in even to the church and ministry that kind of riding the coattails of this toxic masculinity, that men are the problem and I am woman, hear me roar kind of thing. And there's some dynamic that now began, a lot of things that she would say and I would try to make sense of, it became clear after that. But anyway, did the polygraph, passed that. I think you've still got it sealed somewhere, I guess, around Jackson.
100%. And that's the things, Trey, just even when a guy's willing to do that, that speaks volumes. And then, when you did the polygraph and our polygrapher, who's probably one of the best in the country, Gail Mills, she actually worked with Patrick Carnes, Dr. Patrick Carnes, when he had the Gentle Path program at Pine Grove in Hattiesburg, which is always amazing to me. But they were there for several years. And Gail worked with him, with that team, as a polygrapher, when she was here. And she knows the drill. And when Gail tells me that this guy passed with flying colors, it's very true. And so the evidence, dude, that was a huge thing, huge step, necessary. But I don't think it made much of a difference.
No, you'd think that would be a relief, right? If truth is really the goal, but actually she was just angry she didn't get to help come up with the questions. And actually you, Roan, and Jim Kress came up with the questions. And one thing I need to fill in the gap is, and this is where I wish I could do different. I was wrong. Roan, you called me out on this. After that meeting on Monday, I was angry. I was hurt, these false accusations. And at the time it felt like, I've been working recovery, not for her, but for me, but yet now I'm being falsely accused. And I still very much in touch with my guys. They knew where I was, but I spent 2 nights after that in a hotel, and she did not know where I was. And again, Roan, you made it very clear that was a mistake. It was even more traumatic to her. But that was one of the questions, right? Did I act out, on one of those nights where, as far as she was concerned, I didn't have any accountability, even though there were five guys who did know where I was on the phone with them till about 11 o'clock. But that was one of the questions, one, what happened on the climbing weekend, but also what happened in those 2 days where I, in her mind, she would say I went AWOL, but no, I just didn't feel safe with her. And it felt like, wait, I'm being falsely accused, and yet she still wants a front row seat to my accountability and recovery and all that. And so, again, wish I'd handled that differently, but that was a big piece of the thing. But then on the heels of this, I start the covert narcissism. I was being accused of being a covert narcissist. And I don't know if I am or not, but let's take a psych eval and figure it out. And so this was during COVID, on the heels after COVID. So it took a while to get in to see somebody, but finally did that. And so I'm happy to report I'm not a hoarder. I don't have, bipolar. I'm not, not a narcissist. I don't have borderline. I mean, it was a full, the full gamut, right? So
you got papers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Bona fide.
That's right. I do feel that, but even that didn't make a difference, because it was just more, and I think just the case building and then, we were going to go, we talked about coming to see you guys, and I wish we had done that, because as I said, you guys were qualified not only to speak to the marital stuff and understood that piece, but y'all also understand the working dynamics of having a business partner who's also your spouse. And that's a tricky thing, right? To be married to somebody, but also business partners. And I don't know that we ever fully got to I'll ever fully understand kind of how that played, into what she was thinking. And, I'm the executive director. And,
Just, you've given me permission to speak freely about just your process, and that I know that we did a session, Eva and I know you were there, and very willing, a lot of want to. Let me see, how can I say this? May or may not have been there. Elvis was not in the building. I'll just say that. I'll leave it at there. But there wasn't. There was no. Very engaged, and I'll people up and do what's necessary and to deal with whatever it is. I'll there. How about that?
Yeah. Well, and the day before we were supposed to come to see you guys, she pulled the plug on that, citing that she didn't feel safe, and because Roe, all the things, and basically saying, I don't trust them to be professional, right, is basically what she was saying. And also the board, they're trying to figure things out, right? They're friends of ours, and they're trying to rally around us with this crisis. And, you've got the public, we've got a very public ministry. We're helping others, and now we're in crisis again. And so that was and I'm so grateful to the board. I haven't told them enough just how grateful, because they certainly didn't sign up for that, right? It's one thing to sign up to be a board and support our ministry, but they were multiple threats of lawsuits, and one of them had to immediately get off the board because of those threats, because he's got a securities and exchange license that he would lose if he's named in a lawsuit, and all the things. And it was a mess, and couldn't really say anything publicly because all these threats of lawsuits. And as soon as they felt like they had a message, then something would change. And so then, she went to the board.
I will say, Trey, too, the board, because, the board engaged with us. They certainly were, intensives, whatever y'all needed, they stepped to the plate. And so we had several conversations, with the board, and man, what a great group of people. A lot of nonprofits or ministries, they terrible boards, clueless boards, boards, whatever. But man, you had a great board, and a great group of people.
Yeah, and I'm grateful, especially I'm grateful for all of them, but especially there were 4 very strong women on the board, and I'm especially grateful for them because, again, in the Me Too world, and it was very, very, very real at that point. The Ravi Zachariah thing had just come out with his board kind of covering up some things, so she was kind of insinuating that that's what was happening with my board. They're covering up for this narcissist and letting him get away with all this stuff, and so now she goes on the full attack with the board, and the men on the board are like, wait, we're being accused of being misogynistic and all this, and the women, again, grateful for them. They're like, guys, this is not right. And they're the ones that kind of rallied. And these are we're talking business owners. We're talking, executives of $1 billion companies. These are some women who have some chops in the marketplace. And I'm grateful that they were on the board and were able to speak truth. So, because I know there's maybe some guys listening, they're still in that situation. If a woman says it, you're just supposed to believe it. And it's like, as a man, certainly men have done a lot of atrocities and a lot of things that we need to own, but that does not mean every problem known to man is a man's issue, right? It's got to be, we're all broken, and our brokenness shows up in different ways. And so just grateful for the board and the way they handled it. So we were going to go, when it didn't work out for you guys, then they were going to help us go see Jim Kress, another good friend of yours. I know I didn't know Jim well at the time. I certainly knew who he was with the work he had done with Marnie here in the Nashville area. But we were going to go as a couple, but it became very clear this is just case building. That was going to be a waste of time. So I wound up going, and he got like email after email after email, page after page after page. When she wasn't going, man, she was, you know, I didn't get to read all of that, but he just let me know, man. But anyway, I got to go and just say, you know, I did my own trauma egg again, right? You know, just one-on-one with him. And then I went back for another 3 days. So just was grateful for that time to really help me understand kind of what am I dealing with here. And, you know, it's hard when you're letting someone else control the narrative, because when she started attacking the board, then she ran to our church. And the thing about our church, because of COVID and all the online, you know, not meeting him, you know, she wanted to go to another church. And so we never had really gone to another church. So we're still members of this one. So she went back to that church, and this is the same church that practiced church discipline way back in my story before, had a very, very positive experience with that. And I was fine with that. So we went to the church, and now they take our case on as discipline. Well, after this, you know, one of our meetings we had, you know, she, at the end of it, so Jim Kress, my therapist, he's there on Zoom, and her therapist at the time was on Zoom. And so we're wrapping up. They've closed it down, and the guy who's kind of overthink things with the church, he's there. And right as we're leaving, my ex said to the guy at the church, he said, hey, you know, we've got really a lot of pain right now with the board. And, you know, now that we're involved with the church, can we just agree to let the church handle this and take the board out of it? Something to that effect. And I was fine with that. I mean, I trusted the church. Well, so I mentioned this covert narcissism thing, and this is what I found. She had read an article about covert narcissism, and in this particular article, it said that a covert narcissist, a male covert narcissist, has a female that helps prop them up, feel validated or whatever. And so at the time, one of the female board members, she had actually left the board and came to work as our development director. So now she was officing, her businesses were actually officing with us, which helped us afford the rent and all that. And so she had a front row seat, right, to our dynamics and all that stuff. And so certainly she's now our development director, me, the executive director. We had interaction and stuff, and was good friends with my ex as well. As a matter of fact, when she asked, I did move downstairs. We kind of had an in-house separation, but for 9 days, she went to live with this board member and her husband, right? So she reads this article about covert narcissism, and a female props up the male covert narcissist. Well, she goes to this board member, and it's kind of like, I know you don't know what's going on here, but let me just explain to you. Trey's a covert narcissist, and here's the role he's using you in. You're kind of, and this is a very strong woman, still a friend of mine, still a client, and she said very strong. She pushed back. Listen, I'm Trey's friend. I'm your friend. That is not what's happening here, right? And so that's the backdrop. The next day, or that night, we have this meeting with the church. The next morning, I get a text from my ex accusing me of having an emotional affair with this board member. And it's like, okay, to this board member, I invited you over here to my camp. You didn't cooperate, so you're going to get thrown under the bus with me. And that had negative effects on her business. I think there was some contracts now, because Birmingham's a small town, and this stuff you just don't just throw out these very strong accusations without consequences. So anyway, obviously I get this text accusing me of having an emotional affair with someone who was on the board and now a subordinate in the nonprofit. And so certainly in the Me Too world, that's got to be reported. That's a huge accusation. And so let the board know. Well, instead of, confessing, yeah, I made this up or whatever, she's upset. Can you believe just last night, hadn't even been 24 hours, and he agreed not to involve the board. And this is what she's saying to the church. Can you believe he's got to bring the board in again? It's as if I'm supposed to leave the board out of that accusation and not let them know what she's now telling everybody that has happened, which is certainly not true. And so at the first meeting, face-to-face meeting we had with the church, that board member and her husband, well, she was actually coming through Zoom. She was out of town. But her husband, who's a good friend of mine to this day, he's there with me. So it's me and this lady's husband, and she's there on Zoom, and he does most of the talking, very clearly telling the church there's nothing inappropriate going on with my husband, with my wife and Trey. And so anyway, that's kind of, I think people get the picture of what's going on. And, here, it's almost like when all this is happening, it's like, wait, reconciliation is not even, we've got, the church put us in touch with a therapist and try to work on things, but there was nothing to work on because it's like we got false accusations out here. Again, if it was reversed and I'm just making up this stuff about her, we got to get to the bottom of that. What's behind these false accusations before we can talk about anything else? And so, so as I said, when from that April 12th declaration that I had acted out and I need to move out, until this day, there's really been no honest conversation, with my ex. And so, for almost 4 years now, she's controlled the narrative. As far as I know right now on her website, she's got language that basically, unfortunately, the marriage didn't end, but it takes two people to make a marriage work, and very strongly insinuating that I'm back in my addiction. She ultimately got fired by our board because she would not take a sabbatical. She would not yield to their leadership. She's like, I've got women to minister to. And here I'm the one that's being accused of ministry being my mistress, but I'm quickly taking a sabbatical because we need to work on us. We have nothing to offer somebody else. But she refused to do that. And so ultimately they had to let her go. Less than a month later, she starts a new nonprofit, doesn't miss a beat. And, and so that's what, it's been hard, but really for my children's sake, and that's hard too, because you want to have a relationship, obviously, with my children. I'm grateful for the relationship I have with my 4 children. And I'm so thankful that they quickly saw through and got to the truth. That first Christmas after all this blew up, Christmas of 21, I remember saying to them as we're opening gifts, guys, this has been a very, very difficult year. And I remember saying to each of them, I can't imagine how difficult this would be if y'all were believing any of what was being said. And so talking about trauma and betrayal here, to have my openness and my story and the openness I've been about, this, my addiction and the things that I did that I'm certainly not proud of that led to the first divorce, but to have that turned against you and now insinuated, because after she lost her job, in October of that year, she broke into our CRM with our ministry, and she basically sent out an email to our entire database, basically just sounding crazy. And what happened, I'm at the farm at the time with where my parents live, just trying to recoup and hopefully trying to get through this. But she now sends out this public deal. And what happened there is people, I don't know what's going on, but I got into the crazy as well. And I'm just kind of, whatever's going on with Trey and Melody. And so that kind of derailed anything that I could be doing ministry wise. And so I just realized, that ultimately brought me to Tennessee, got back into educational software selling, and which is where I've been. So anyway, that's lots of gaps there. But the main thing, the public until now didn't know I did a polygraph. They don't know that I passed a psych eval. And I remember you, Ron, saying, dude, the fact that you're open to being a narcissist is a pretty clear indication you're not one, right? I remember, I think you told me that when I was driving over to Jackson to do the polygraph. But anyway, I'm sure there's some questions and fill in the gaps, but it's been a while since I've even rehashed all that, and I even feel the emotion. Thankfully, it's not as strong as the anger has subsided, and really, I said even before. When I began to really understand grace, is you're getting grace when you're able to give grace to people who don't think they need it. And I think that's the wow. true understanding of grace, right? And so that's kind of where I've tried to land. Certainly have not done it perfectly. Again, that season of anger, and just really, I can say though, I went through that season of anger as a beloved son. And here's what I mean. Before I really understood grace, and before I understood that I was living as an orphan, I'm trying to do all these good things for God so he'll like me, right? And so I can say, as messy as it was and as angry as I was engaging him, and I think really wrestling with him, and sometimes wanting to just shoot him a bird and, F you, this is not working out. I think I'll
say that. Yeah.
He just did.
Well, I did.
He said,
yeah. Yeah. And that's unlike before though, I felt safe enough with God and his love to be there, as messy as it was, as painful as it was, because I was like, God, why in the world did you bring us this miraculous reconciliation? Our story's featured in this movie, and now it blows up, like this. And so I have no more hope to give guys. And that's been something I've had to work through. What do I have to offer men? Because that was a big draw for our ministry, is because, to the point that some guys were trying to make that a formula. Okay, I've been divorced for 5 years. I've heard your story of being divorced for 6 years. Maybe God's going to do in my story exactly what he did in yours, and it's a 6-year mark. We're going to reconcile, because that's what we do in our human heart. We want to make everything a formula, right? I think that's why God never showed up the same way twice in Scripture. He never performed the same miracle twice in the same way, because he knows us. He knows that we really want the results more than we want him. And so it's like, okay, I get it. He's done this twice in a row. This is the formula. God, if you want to show up, great. But in case you don't, we've got the formula. So from, telling Gideon to weed out his army in the way he did with the way they drank, you're outnumbered already, but you really got too many. Let's weed it down to 300. Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showing up in the fiery furnace. On and on and on we can go. Moses striking the rock. It never was the same way twice. And that's, anyway, there's a lot of, I think one thing that Jim Kress said one of the times, I forget if it's the first or second time I was with him, and I think you reiterated this too, Roan, is I really didn't understand the toxic waters that I was swimming in until I was on the other side of it. And that's hard. I thought, hey, we've worked through this. We've got the tools now that whatever happens. I mean, again, I never dreamed that I would be divorced again unless it was me getting back in my addiction. I certainly didn't have on my bingo card it was being accused of being back in my addiction, and then everything blowing up. So, but anyway, I'm sure y'all got questions and maybe some blanks that we need to fill in with that.
Wow. Undone, redone, done, right? And certainly, right. When I got to know you or met you, you're in the middle of, things were popping, and a lot was happening, and it was awesome. And, in many ways, it's kind of like, Eve and I and what God's done in our life, our stories, getting married, or young, and then, going through hell and getting divorced and then getting remarried. It's that. Only crazy people do that, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, I've told others, it's like, dang, your story scares me a little bit. Well, no, I don't think. The difference is, I know that has done her work, and there's so much in your story. We could do episodes, much of it, the transference at today in this coaching realm with people that are not really trained and through it, hopefully at least that, but they've never done their work. You don't know what kind of work their did. Any can be angry and bitter, and they can project that, transfer that people that they're trying to help. And I believe, it's good intentions. However, we know the road to hell is paved with those. And I could keep going down the list. And just for you, being in the movie, I mean, you got things happening ministry-wise, and then all of a sudden you get hit in the face with a 2x4, and now you are divorced and you're on your own.
Yeah. Well, and also
the stuff,
no livelihood, right? The
yeah,
livelihood was gone too. wasn't like I went through all this and the income kept coming, because it also blew up, the livelihood and income.
Turned off.
And I'd worked really hard. Yeah, I'd worked really hard. I mean, we'd had struggled the first few years, and finally had gotten our donor base and, all this stuff where it needed to be. And I'm back to the board and how grateful I am for them. They allowed me 9 months paid severance, sabbatical basically, to be on a paid sabbatical for 9 months. And it wasn't said, hey, it's going to be 9 months. It was just this, and hey, you go heal. And what a gift that was to be able to go to the farm where I grew up and just be there and not have to worry about how I'm going to make a living. Didn't have to figure that out, immediately. It was such a blessing. And as I shared, ultimately, got back, called a buddy that I used to work with, and they were hiring in Tennessee. Already had a son who lived in Nashville, so moved to Franklin and started selling again. So yeah, just, grateful for that. And then just, update, did start, dating, and actually a woman in Florida, 10 hours from where I am here in Franklin, who had been listening to our podcast, actually. And she had reached out with a question about, she knew we'd gone through something. Obviously, nothing really public had been put out there. But she saw that I still had a relationship with my kids, and she was curious in her own story how that was working, because she was struggling with some of that. And so we began talking. I assumed she was married. Anyway, long story short, we developed a relationship, and long distance, and now are engaged and going to be married, remarried pretty soon. So, I never, and one of the questions she said, do you want to be married again? And certainly, with everything that I've been through, you'd think that maybe, nope, not going there again. And
Good. I'm good. Yeah.
But I can say I never lost my vision, love for what marriage, because again, I know the work I've done. I know, what it means to try to be the chief repenter in a relationship, to have someone you're married to who's also a sinner, right? They're broken in different ways. And I know the tendency is we always want to magnify someone else's brokenness as we minimize our own, but it's a magical thing when both are striving to be the chief repenter instead of the chief performer, and trying to one-up each other. And because what I realize, that's just my unbelief of the gospel when I'm doing that, right? When I feel I've got to see myself a little bit better than I am, what I'm really saying is I don't really believe at some gut level that what Jesus did was enough, because maybe if I'm this good, he did enough. But man, if I'm really honest about how broken I really am, I'm afraid that maybe his blood doesn't cover that. So let me put on a mask and pretend otherwise. And so I think that's the beauty of marriage and the way God used it. I think sometimes it becomes an idol in our churches even, but it's really a sanctification mechanism that God uses to bubble up the stuff in us that he wants to change and transform. And so I never lost sight of that. And, I feel like now I've done enough. I'll, of course, be doing my own work the rest of my life, but grateful for the work that she's done. And, someone said once, after my first divorce, said, you're just looking for Miss Perfect. I said, actually, it's just the opposite. Not only am I not looking for Miss Perfect, I'm actually looking for someone who knows where their imperfections lie, right? And that only comes from when we've done our work, right? When they are eyes wide open to their own stuff and not blind to it, and their coping mechanisms and all that. And with her, I am so excited, engaged now and, soon to be married. So ready for the next chapter.
Dude, you have like the happiest Instagram on Instagram right now. It's crazy.
Well, it's, and for a long time we couldn't put anything out there, just with both of our situations and I'm glad that we can, and she's great. And of course that says a lot about her, right? Want to step into this, wow, there's a lot. I mean, we filled in a lot of gaps, but there's still a lot to the story. It's certainly messy and anything but ideal. But with her, I just said, with me, you're hopefully coming in with eyes wide open because it's all out there, right? There's no secrets. And so, but I still have a heart for men, and that's something I've really struggled with. Ron, you've helped me with that God's not finished with using me in that area, but that has been a big lie of the enemy, is you have nothing to offer men now. You can't keep your own marriage together. What do you have to offer anybody else? And all I can say is I honestly believe that I did everything I could do to save the marriage. Again, I wish I'd been more tuned in as it went, as I shared, but once it came to my attention that she was where she was, the switch had been flipped, and it was never switched back at the other direction. It was just, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening, and I'm just going to wring my hands and find enough people to believe what I'm doing. Went through multiple attorneys, that she'd get them all spun up and want to sue the board and how they mistreated her and all this. And as soon as that attorney would speak to the board's attorney and figure out what's really going on, then she was like, again, not listening to truth, she had a mandate, and that she wanted people just to do what she wanted to do. And it's been hard, hurtful, with my kids. I love them to death, but it is hard when somebody betrays you like that, and you see them still in relationship with that person. That's very, very hard to navigate. I think with my oldest, and I've had to repent of this with her, seeing her Instagram, she's out taking pictures all over the world. And, especially when I was in the throes of the pain and the heartache with this, I subconsciously kind of pulled back a little bit from her, and she was gracious and shared that, Dad, I want to be pursued. I want to have a relationship with you. But I think I was so afraid that my anger and my hurt toward her mother would bleed over into our relationship, that somehow. And so I think just subconsciously it was like, well, I don't want to bring her down in any way with that potential. But I also realized that she can handle that. And I'm, definitely at a place now where, again, the anger has mostly subsided. And, we've had weddings. We had 2 weddings since this all, my 2 youngest are now married. So having to go back and navigate a wedding. And that's one thing I'll wrap up kind of the story. What brought me out of the anger season is my daughter got married in end of July 2. So this all happened April of 21, and I'm at the farm, and I'm trying to get in the right mindset to come back and be able to celebrate my daughter's wedding, all the great, wonderful things of marriage. One of the first times I had been around my ex in this setting, I had no control over what she was going to do or say. All these people that maybe had believed her narrative in Birmingham, because this time I've already moved to Tennessee. I'm kind of walking back into the lion's den, it felt like. And so I'm trying to get, I don't want to just, because I'll go plain vanilla really easily, because when I feel like I'm being accused or whatever, I'll just not give the other person anything to work with. And I didn't want to pull back. I wanted to show up fully for my daughter and my family, my other children at this beautiful wedding, the first of our children to be married. And so my birthday is July 1st. And every year that's kind of, because it's right in the middle of the year, that's always kind of, New Year's resolutions. And I'd always historically, probably the last 20 years, my birthday is kind of a recalibration of how am I doing? Let's reset goals, that kind of stuff. Well, this year at the end of the month, it was going to be my daughter's wedding. And so I'm in this angry season, and, again, as I said, doing it as a beloved son, but still it's messy and it's hard. And I just wanted to show up well. And so I took time off work. Took a week off for my birthday, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And full disclosure, I even had a thought of maybe one of these all-inclusives, maybe I'll just go and, maybe even what's that hedonism thing? I'll be honest. There was even that thought of, maybe I'll just go try some of that out. And so I'm literally on Facebook, and I didn't really get on Facebook much during this period. And, Brandon Henry, that I'd met, they had done the climbing weekend that I'd met at deer camp, and that original trip to Colorado that they were telling me about. And then he said in the food line, no, but you ought to go to this thing in North Alabama. Well, he put out a thing in their men's adventure trip. He's got 1 spot left on the men's adventure trip. And at the time, I was almost like, I remember, because again, as a beloved son, I was like, are you kidding me, God? I was almost kind of angry. Is this what you're doing? I want to stay angry over here. And I see, even in my anger, I see how you're showing up and how you're working. And so, and July at the time with my commission, my biggest commission check hits in July, because that's when the money comes in the state of Tennessee. They get their funding July 1. And so the money was there. I had no excuse right? And it was pretty clear. Okay, isn't this just like God? Full circle. The same guys that I was on the climbing weekend when everything blew up in April of 21, here and now in July of 22, late June and July of 22, right before my daughter's wedding, I'm going on this trip. And guys, I went not as Trey, who's got it all together and was in this movie and, you know, had helped all these people and done his own intensives and all this stuff. I went as a struggler. I went in my anger. The guys who were on that trip can tell you, certainly Brandon and Bill can tell you, I was just one of the guys who was hurting. I was bleeding out still, and just let those guys love on me. Bill and Brandon were amazing. But that's really, that trip is what brought me out of that season of anger and just, I didn't know what, it didn't fix everything. I didn't know what the future held. But then it was the October after the wedding went great. I was able to walk my daughter down the aisle. It was a pouring rainstorm that we literally have umbrellas, and just to see my beautiful daughter, how she graciously, everything opposite of Bridezilla. I mean, it was just amazing. She was singing worship as we were about to walk down and seeing literally lightning. I mean, there's some pictures from her wedding with hair, you know, soaking wet, and there's lightning streak in the background, but had a beautiful wedding. And then since then, my son last October got married. So anyway, it's been anything but easy, but I'm so glad because it was October, late October, when my fiance and I started talking, and I'm so grateful that I didn't meet her and then want to clean up my act, right? Then wanted to get back where I needed to be, that God had already brought me out of that I realized my recovery started before my reconciliation to my ex, right? And so I had to remind myself, because it's hard when you're doing the things and then you're falsely accused of doing the wrong thing. There is this thought of, why am I doing this, right? But I had to remind myself, just like I remind many men, you're not doing this for her, right? It's because this is the bigger story God's calling you to. It's not, you know, because I think sometimes in recovery, there's a lot of men who are technically sober, but it really is more just maybe a dry drunk, right? It's like you kind of that middle circle we talk about in recovery. If they're really honest, they're kind of in that middle circle longing for the acting out. They're kind of pissed that they can't have the medicine anymore, even though technically they're not acting out, because there hasn't been this expulsive power of the new affection, you know, as the old Thomas Chalmers, the Puritan pastor, you know, his famous sermon. And that's what I had to remind myself, is that acting out is not like a 7-layer chocolate cake from P.F. Chang's, right? The Great Wall of Chocolate, I think they call it. It's like sometimes we think of that's what acting out is, this chocolate, and recovery is this bland, cardboard tasting granola diet, right? It's good for me, but it really sucks, right? You know, and
quinoa, yeah.
That's right. That's right. We can get in that.
Quinoa, yeah.
Yeah, we can get into that mindset that, yeah, this is God's best for me, is for the rest of my life to be on the straight and narrow, but it's a bland diet, and I really wish I could have some more of that Great Wall of Chocolate cake. And to realize that's a lie, that the acting out is death. That's not his best for us. And that's what I was reminded in a beautiful way. We summited Harvard. It was my second 14er. One of the hardest things I've done. I remember I had on a pair of Prana pants, and Prana pants, literally on the back of the thing, it says breathe. And I'm hunched over on my trekking poles, not quite to the top, and literally my pants are telling me to breathe on this trip. But being able to summit that mountain, and really that true mountaintop experience, the loving experience of these guys. And that's what masculine community is all about. And for the rest of my life, that's what I'm going to be calling men to, because it saved my life, not once, but twice, right? Is having men. And I'm so grateful. All the men know who they are. Mike Flink, you know, Jeff Glenn, you, Roan. I'm grateful for Jim Kress. I'm probably leaving a lot of folks out, you know, Phil, you know, being able to go on the river trip with you guys last year. And that was a big piece. And one of the reasons I wanted to be your roommate is because now that far removed that you could, you know, gently over time just kind of help me understand. You know, I think I said, did you get the tag number of that bus I got hit by? And you were able to help me with a lot of that. So, but I guess just, you know, God is still at work. This is not the story I thought, you know, I've said all along, God is writing a good story. there's sucky chapters along the way. Every good movie we ever see, there's many, many scenes in that movie that the protagonist doesn't know if he's going to make it, right? But it's a good story. And so I think that's what I'm learning more and more. One of the first talks I do at our Embark weekends is, this is plan A. And that was a struggle for me. And I had to apply that, because it's not like I messed up plan A and I got to work my way back to it. As hard as it was to wrap my head around, how in the world is this God's plan A, right? Not the story that I would have written. I still don't know how the story's ultimately going to end, but I know he's good. And so I just encourage, wherever the listener is, whatever you're going through, maybe you're in a marriage where you feel like you are in a parent-child situation, that you don't have a voice because you've messed up and now you've come back in and now it's just multiple hoops and the never-ending series of hoops that you've got to jump through, and always something new and different to be in the good graces. And it just identity is such a big piece, and knowing who we are and showing up in that true identity and with a strength, because I think that's where a lot of guys are. I know that's something I've struggled with, is what is it like to show up in masculine strength when that's certainly what evil is attacking right now. He is castrating men right and left, and certainly there's a lot of bad things going on out there, but as men, we can't, as C.S. Lewis says, we castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful, right? I don't think there's ever been a point in time where that's more obvious than where we are right now. I am encouraged where it looks like we are beginning to turn the corner, hopefully in a lot of that, with what's just going on in society at large. More we can talk openly about these things, that masculinity is not a cuss word, right? That there is that men and women, and I think, just to speak to that feminism stuff, I think where feminism gets off the rails in a lot of ways, but one of the main ways is a fight for sameness instead of equality, because men and women are not the same. I think that's pretty obvious, right? Strength, all the things that are crazy in that. We are equal, but not same. We uniquely reflect the glory of God in our feminine and in our masculine. And I think the beauty when we are safe and can show up fully in our masculine strength, in our feminine strength, the beauty of that and how God designed it, that we don't have to commit to fight for sameness, because with that fight, what happens is women get into that masculine energy and it's not very attractive. Right. And for any woman, you don't have to prove yourself as a woman. It's certainly not getting, reducing your femininity and trying to take on more masculinity. It's more fully reflecting the glory of God in your femininity. That's really what it's all about. And so I pray for men out there who is part of your strength right now is maybe going toe to toe with your spouse right now. And because I will say, whatever's being done or said, she's looking for something strong to butt up against. She's looking for something strong as a defining mechanism. And I know for me, certainly early on, I thought instead of iron sharpening the iron, marshmallows don't sharpen marshmallows, right? And being the passive nice guy, I was just trying to give. If I'll just give and keep her happy, but it creates great insecurity, right? That there is we need to be in touch with that iron part of us as men, that hardness, that dangerous part, right? I love what Jordan Peterson says. A good man is not a harmless man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control.
Yeah, dude, that idea of just, trying to equality, even in a marriage, the way Eva and I often talk about that is just, it's the idea of mutuality, right? Everything in a healthy relationship is mutual. And if I'm operating out of my masculine strength and she's operating out of her feminine strength, it kind of works. It has to be mutual. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I will say, for the women listening, there's a lot of men who've abdicated that. That certainly was me early on before I started recovery. I didn't know what to do with my masculine strength. It was my heart getting me in trouble, so I just need to kill that so that I could be this dutiful, passive, nice guy. Just, didn't know how to fight out my way out of a paper sack, because that was not Christ-like, right? Just like passivity, but rereading the Gospels, like, wait, Jesus did not avoid conflict. Jesus resolved conflict. And a lot of the conflict he resolved was conflict he created, because it was conflict that needed to happen. The interesting thing, when he turned over, he disrupted their livelihood there at the temple. Very methodically, he's weaving together this whip. This was not a, just catch him off guard, reactive type thing. This is very calculated.
Oh,
And what's interesting about that?
Yeah, I don't think he said, "Hey, Peter, therapy support lamb," and I'm gonna go.
That's right.
Right. No.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about that, and this is not, the whole gentle Jesus, meek and mild, with the flowing, feminine olive skin that we grew up on the felt board in Sunday school. What's interesting about that story is nobody stopped him. You would think if somebody's coming in and disrupting your livelihood, multiple vendors there, that somebody would have said, dude, you need to stop, and went toe to toe with him. I think 30 years as a carpenter and all those big beams, he was probably a formidable dude, right? It wasn't this gentle Jesus, effeminate, meek and mild.
He probably looked a little bit more like Maximus, the therapy support lamb Jesus. That's kind of my thinking.
Exactly.
I imagine him that way. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well,
you bring up an interesting point, Trey, that I've been like, kind of, I don't know, I've been struggling even how to ask the question, but we have so many listeners on the male side, so many listeners on the female side, and we're hearing from both on a, thank God, on a pretty regular basis. You shared your story so beautifully, man, and I think, I wish all of our listeners could see, all of our podcast listeners could see you. Just the care with which you were sharing is evidence of your authenticity. This piece right here of your story, though, where the idea of, as a man, because of what I know that I could be, I'm unwilling to be what I should be. I think that's a trap. People in my coaching practice, I see men in that position so often that, man, I know what I'm capable of. I know the things that I've done. I know the people that I've hurt, and I'm unwilling to go there. So I'm going to back way up from that line, and I'm going to sit over here safe, passive, compliant, codependent, and not. We're going to have to mute Roan here in a second, but certainly the church props that idea of masculinity up, and yeah, I would really want, if you could, just for a few minutes, to articulate both for the betrayed wives that are listening, for the men who have hurt their wives that are listening. Man, how did you navigate that space?
Yeah, well, I'd say that season, I didn't do it perfectly, but I am glad that I was doing it even imperfectly as a son, right? That felt safe, even with his father, to wrestle well and be angry and yell and, all that stuff, lots of tears. But yeah, I think, we see, well, I think first of all, that's what evil does. He wants to take us out. And I think you talked about, I talk a lot about just, being relegated to the sidelines. We don't want to be in the arena because somebody can be offended. And we're living in a day and time where everybody's offended by everything, right? And if we're wanting to show up, and I know in my own story that me playing small is not moving the kingdom forward. And I think that's my tendency. If I'll just play small, I won't offend anybody. If I'll just play small, I'm not going to ruffle any feathers. Everybody will like me, because that was really my idol, in the passivity. I just needed everybody to like me, because if everybody likes me, then I must be okay. But I think the more work we do in our own identity and knowing who we are and whose we are and how he's uniquely created us, that and that's a big part of another intensive we do, the Braveheart Intensive. I mentioned Michael Warden. Being able to go through that not once but twice and understand my own identity, my true name, Lionheart, and being able to show up in that and realize that, when you're doing that, you're going to have enemies. I mean, look around us. I mean, anybody who's making a stand for anything, there's going to be naysayers. And I would even go as far as saying, if you don't have naysayers, if you don't have folks who are wanting to throw rocks and bring you down, are you really doing anything, right? And I'm even now, as I'm kind of stepping back in, even doing this podcast, it's like there's a temptation. Do I really want to say anything? Do I really want to stir something back up? It's been almost 4 years. But I realize that there are a lot of therapists who are confused, right? I've allowed her to, control the narrative, right? And so the assumption is, well, it must be true, but the reality is now I've been just working on me, and now, and that's what we do, right? We heal, we go to our community, and then we bring that strength to the world. And I'm grateful for masculine community because it's men who make men. And I think so often as men, we are taking the question, as Eldridge talks a lot about this, we take the question, do I have what it takes as a man, to the woman, to our wives, to other females in our life, because we want that female validation. I must be okay as a man because the female says I'm okay. And often that is our spouse or significant other. We've got to know who we are as men, and that's why masculine community is so important. That's why Deer Camp is so important. That's why these intensive y'all do are so important. The work you're doing, Ben, is because until a man knows who he is, it's almost like we have to leave the woman, find our strength, and then bring that strength back to her. Bring that strength back to the relationship. That's what true masculine strength is all about. It's men who make men. That's where the iron sharpens iron. And unfortunately, most men don't have that. It's the pancake breakfast and it's the quote unquote accountability we talk about. But here's the thing. We can't have true accountability where there is no community, right? And so that's what we happen. We say, oh yeah, all these men need to be in community. We try to put them in accountability groups, but there's no community. So if I don't know a brother loves me, Roan, you can hold me accountable because I know you love me. You know me. You've stepped into my story. You haven't run with all the mess. So I am wide open to your loving correction and rebuke. That's true accountability. I would even say this. Accountability for most men's ministry becomes moral policing. What it really is calling forth the true identity of another man. When I see my brother, like the ones that, like my good friend Travis, I've been there when he's done his identity work. I know who he is, how he's articulated, how God has uniquely created that brother. And so when I see him living beneath that, because I love him, accountability is saying, brother, that's not who you are, right? It's not trying to morally police his behavior. It's calling him to his true nature, his true identity that I know. And because we forget, right? We forget who we are, and we need brothers to remind us. And so that's why this work of men, sharpening men, is so important, to know who we are, because then once we're grounded in who we are, then our mission flows out of that. I think for so many men, our mission is our identity. And that's why we have so many midlife crises, because we lose a job, we're trying to, all this stuff that makes us feel like a man. No, we got to know who we are, and then our mission, what we do, flows out of that. But if we try to get that backwards and that becomes our identity, it's insecurity, and it's we're running into women and all these other things. And that's why I think we see so much harm in the world, is we've got so many little boys in adult bodies. There's a poem. I was an English minor and loved poetry, and one of William Butler Yeats was one of my favorite. He wrote a poem called Cool Park, and in it he described a male character. And I think we see this around the world right now with what's happening among men. He said, "They're one that ruffled in a manly pose for all his timid heart." And so I think in that, because we don't know who we are in our true masculine identity, what we're doing is we're ruffling in a manly pose for all our timid heart. We're ruffling in a new Corvette. We're ruffling in a job, which are position or title, or maybe our bank account. Whatever we believe, this means I'm a man. I must have arrived, right? Because inside we're so insecure because we don't know who we are. It's really the hero's journey, leaving the known, stepping into the crazy, wild, adventurous unknown, finding ourselves, and then bringing that as blanking on his name, the guy who came up with the whole hero's journey. I studied him in college.
Joseph
Campbell. Yeah, Joseph Campbell. He talks about the magic elixir. It's in that cave experience where we uncover the magic elixir, and now we come back to the known but we're not the same. We have this new knowledge, this new understanding of who we are. And that's every great movie from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, that hero's journey that resonates, I think, in men and women, but certainly men. That's what God's calling us to. And I wish it was easy, but it's actually a healing journey through pain. And that's what this is reminding me of. Somehow I forgot. I thought I had already been through all the pain, but it's just a fresh reminder that the healing journey is through pain. And what I know for myself, when I'm trying to avoid pain, I'm probably trying to do things myself rather than truly trusting that God is at work. To be honest, I want to be pain-free. I don't like headed into the pain.
There's only three kinds of people in the world.
You quote this so many times. You say that the glory of God is a man fully alive. Isn't it awesome to be sitting here with our brother and see, even in this episode, the transition from, as I'm recounting the pain and the difficulty, when we start talking about the hero's journey and where he is, man, this guy's freaking fully alive. I mean, isn't this awesome?
Yeah,
dude, it is.
I'll receive that affirmation. Yeah.
And dude, that's one reason I just always love being with you.
Yeah. Well, I think just even stepping out, telling the story, because that has been a thing, temptation, just play small, right? Don't try to put, just let her control the narrative, play small, and just, relegate yourself to the sidelines. And, no, I think evil wins when we do that, when we choose to play small, that, we all have gifts, and to step into the arena, when we're on the sidelines, evil doesn't have to take notice. But when we step into the arena and we begin to show up as we were created, hell, evil take notice. And, I think to assume it should be easy, I think it's also basically assume it's going to be hard, right? We're going to have opposition. I think Scripture's pretty clear with that. Absolutely. But I just appreciate the platform you guys have. It's, it's been great to rehash some of this and just even remind myself of the gospel, that he's not finished, that I am a beloved son, that as crazy as this story is, it's a good story. And I do hope, certainly can encourage some. I'm certainly open if somebody wants to reach out to me, and maybe there's something that really struck a chord with their own story and they want to kind of get a little bit more information, be glad to share that. But this is hard because I do have 4 children and I want them to have a great relationship with their mom, and they're trying to navigate, how do we have a relationship when we know that a lot of this stuff has been made up and there's never been any type of retraction on any of this, only just more and more, accusations, many of that I didn't even get into today, but anyway, God is good and he's not done.
It's, so often, you could do this and make it a she said, he said type thing. And I've experienced even sitting with you here today, or do it with you. This is more, hey, these are the facts. This is reality. And good mental, emotional, spiritual health is a relentless commitment to living in reality. And so
that's right.
You've just brought reality, truth to the table. Thanks, Trey. And I've heard you say it before, when we're living as the chief repenter, who is the chief reformer, that older brother that didn't do anything wrong. And, I always talk about it. Eva talks about it. Before at her Grace Awakening, we go to counseling and, problem, I'm fine, fix him. And boy, never, you can stay married, but you're never going to have a marriage that thrives, because in any marriage, and certainly when there's been betrayal and infidelity, if to survive, but certainly thrive. It's two people doing their work and owning their story. And when you're with somebody that can't own their story, it's problematic. And in our world of the sexual addiction today and betrayal trauma and all this stuff that's out there, those people out there that are therapists and that are as experts, promoting a paradigm of where it's basically that type of paradigm, which we would just call it, the power struggle. It's a one up, one down position.
Correct.
I have sat with people that have gone to those, and there's not just one. There's many that are promoting this now, because the spouse, the wife especially, seeking behavior. And if I can somehow be in control and you can just stay in the one down position, then everything's okay. Go to a couples intensive and get charged $10,000 to laid out there for you and set it up that way. And then, you go home and then the husband gets locked down in the basement and she feels very safe. But it's probably the most unsafe place that she could ever be, because when a man feels like he's controlled and a man feels like he doesn't have a voice, then what happens is resentment, and only a matter of time. If we're moving to mutuality and each person owning their story, it is dangerous. And again, I'm not singling any one therapist out or one group out. It's pretty prevalent, and certainly, we've in hearing your story even today, it's just a reminder to all of us. It's like, man, both people got to be doing their work, and it's not, we're not finished, right? It's like, man, we're just in the process. We can go Bible and call it sanctification. All there, and it's like, man, we got to stay engaged in the process. Both people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
experience, betrayal trauma. It than just sexual betrayal, right? What you went through was significant betrayal trauma.
Yeah, and I do believe that. And, it's one thing, because I know with my ex and the betrayal trauma that she went through and, helps other women go through whatever, but I immediately apologized. I immediately started recovery and all that. I think as I look at my situation, I've never gotten an apology, probably never will get an apology. You're right. And so that's why it's trying to navigate, big events like weddings and all that kind of stuff. And, and again, just to get back to that grace message, is giving grace when the other person doesn't even think they need it. They're kind of up on God's holy mountain looking down at you. And, it's just, I just realized that one thing that my role is not is to put people in their place. I just want to live my life, live in the truth, and not be so concerned about what people do or do not think. The facts are the facts. And part of that is why I could wait 3.5 years, almost 4 years, and let the narrative be controlled. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, even after hearing this, maybe still convinced that, I must have done something, right? And certainly wasn't a perfect husband, but I can say I was still in recovery and I was still sober, and that I had not acted out on the climbing weekend and all that. And I even got women who were on that weekend. It was kind of interesting. I was here in Nashville. I had lunch or had dinner with a guy that Bill had put me in touch with, and I told a little bit of my story. And I get a text from him at 10:30 that night, and he didn't even put this together. He was like, dude, I know you're telling the truth, because I just told my wife who I'd met tonight, and she said, I was on that trip. So she actually confirmed she was one of the females that was there. And that's the thing. I said, why don't you just call Bill or Brandon? My ex thought that was the craziest idea. She was already convinced what happened. She didn't need to get any facts. Anyway, it's don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is made up.
Mm-hmm.
yes, what I've gotten out of just our time together here on the podcast today is that all of this is Bill and Brandon's fault. That's what I heard.
I knew a joke was coming.
That's right.
Coming. You knew it was coming. Dude, we could, oh yeah, dude, I love just giving a hard time. It's nothing better. We could go full Joe Rogan and do 3 hours. We could just keep going. Holy cow!
Well, there's obviously a market for it. There's a market for it, right?
It seems to be, but has to do the editing and he'll have to. Yeah, he doesn't have any time now. He used to when he was a pastor. He didn't have anything to do, and now he's actually like out there working and hustling, and he's having to do what we all do. As I did it again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, let me rescue this by saying, I don't know, Trey, if you're like on God's holy mountain or the dark night of the soul, the deepest valley, whatever you would call it, but if Bill Blair's there and Roan's there and Phil's there and Jim Kress is there and Eli Machen is there and you're there, bro, that's where I want to be.
That's right. That's a good point. Absolutely. And the truth is truth, right? And we don't have to apologize for the truth. And that's part of living in our identity and being okay. And this has been a journey for me because I was a pleaser when I started preaching in high school. Certainly pleasing was a big piece, but just being okay that people maybe not want to see the truth, and that's fine.
Dude, I have a feeling that we're probably going to have you back on here several times.
We loved it.
If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that today?
Yeah. So just email Trey at traylovern.com, TRAYLOVVORN.com. That's the best way. My website, traylovern.com. So that's probably the easiest way. And I would love to fill in any blanks if this resonated. I know probably some guys listening that, have been following my story. Unfortunately, I know there were some guys that their wife who was involved with Melody did do the whole covert narcissist, kind of the same playbook. And so I know there's some other hurting men out there. And so we'd love to talk and, share and encourage and all of that.
Man, thank you, bro. It is so great just to do it together. And I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Love you, dude.
Love you, man.
Thank y'all.